Hello, my Juicy Co-creators. Lilu here on the Juicy Living Tour, and today with Dr. Joe. Oh my goodness.
Happy to be with you.
I am very, very happy to be with you. We're actually right outside of Olympia in Washington, south of Seattle, north of Portland, all the way northwest of the United States. And it's going to be, this is a very exciting conversation because really science is a bridge to many things. And here we're going to go, you're interested about neuroscience and the brain and the memory and the cells, and you were featured in the What the Bleep Do We Know? And you wrote a book, your Evolve Your Brain.
Evolve Your Brain, the Science of Changing Your Mind.
So tell us, how can we use our brain to change our reality? What's really going on in the brain so we can start, should I say, rewiring it so that we start experiencing a new reality?
Well, I think science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think that when we learn a bit about the brain or a bit about neuroscience or quantum physics, it gives us a little hint about how we can apply it to our lives to do a better job. Now, we have three brains that allow us to go from thinking to doing to being. Your thinking brain is your neocortex. That's that walnut-shaped, corrugated, big brain that sits on the outside. And that part of your brain is responsible for your conscious awareness. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. And every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your brain. That's what learning is. Learning is molding synaptic connections. Remembering is maintaining and sustaining connections. So you read a book on how to ride a bicycle, you read a book on how to dance the salsa, you read a book on how to cook French cuisine, you read a book on how to build a doghouse, you read a book about compassion by the Dalai Lama. All that information is stored in your thinking brain. Now, the purpose of all of that philosophical knowledge is to take it and apply it, to personalize it, to demonstrate it. And when you take what you learn and you modify your behavior in some way, you do something with it, you change your actions, you're going to have a new experience. When you have a new experience, gangs of neurons begin to organize themselves to reflect the event. So when you're in the midst of an experience, everything you're seeing and smelling and tasting and feeling and hearing, all of your five senses are immersed in the environmental experience. And as all of the sensory data rushes back to your brain through five different pathways, jungles of neurons organize themselves and string into place. And the moment they organize into a pattern, the brain releases a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. So feelings and emotions then are the end product of past experience. So let's say you read the book by the Dalai Lama or about compassion, or you read a book about forgiveness. And you could repeat all that information. It was all theory. It was all fact. It was knowledge. It was void of experience. But when you actually forgive someone or you demonstrate compassion, the moment you feel what that feeling feels like, the emotions that you're experiencing are teaching your body what your mind has intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. So the moment you get your behaviors to match your intentions, or you get your actions equal to your thoughts, the moment you align mind and body, you're going to have a new experience, and that new experience is going to produce a new emotion. And the moment you have a new experience that produces a new emotion, your body is genetically changing to reflect a new environmental experience. That's called evolution. And when you do that, the second brain becomes activated, the limbic brain or the emotional brain or the chemical brain. But it's not enough to do it once. We have to be able to repeat the experience, be able to do it over and over again. And whenever you can replicate an experience at will, when you can do it over and over and over again, there comes a moment where you activate that third brain called the cerebellum. And when you can do something over and over again, you've done it so many times that you no longer have to think about it. Now you're in a state of being. And a state of being is when mind and body are working together, or better said, you've practiced it so many times that your body knows as well as your brain. And the moment your body knows as well as your brain, or your mind and body are one, that's called being it. And when we're in a state of being, the quantum field or the universal principle says that everything responds to who we're being. So that evolution using the brain from going from thinking to doing to being is really the steps we take to be able to do a better job in our life.
So before we go in this really beautiful bliss state where everything is pure synchronicity, magic, we can even say, and really this really, really beautiful, deep, joyful experience. There's those challenges. There's those patterns that have been there for many, many, many years. How do we break through that? How do we even start to forgive somebody, for example, that has been there, and we have a lot of resentment and anger.
Sure.
And the paths are going like this.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's really the basis of why it's so hard to change. If you think about it, we said that emotions and feelings are the end product of experience, and we've all been branded from experiences that produce really strong emotions. And when we have a really strong emotional experience from some event in our life, we notice a change in our internal chemistry. We notice we feel differently, and then we pay attention to whoever or whatever it was that caused that. Now, every time there's an emotional reaction to some experience, good or bad, traumatic or crisis or whatever, there's a refractory period of chemicals that's created. And if you don't know how to control that chemical reaction, and you let those emotions linger for hours or days, that's called a mood. Well, what's wrong with you? Oh, I'm in a mood. Why are you in a mood? Well, this thing happened to me 5 days ago. Now, if you keep that refractory period going on for months on end, weeks or months, that's called a temperament. Why is she so angry? Oh, well, I don't know. Why are you so angry? Well, this thing happened to me 11 months ago, and I'm memorizing my emotional reaction. Now, if you keep that refractory period going for years on end, that's called a personality trait. So we tend to have experiences that produce strong emotions, and those emotions tend to drive the way we think and the way we behave. And that emotion then becomes one long refractory period that becomes part of our personality. If we want to change then that emotion, or change some aspect of ourselves, we have to begin to unmemorize that emotion, because that emotion colors us and flavors how we think and act. Now here's the problem. Those emotions that we respond to that creates, the emotions of anger and judgment and hatred and fear and anxiety and pain and suffering, the chemicals that are created in the body from those emotions are highly addictive. They give the body a rush of energy, and what happens over time is people become unconsciously addicted to the emotion to reaffirm who they are connected to some past experience. So the person may consciously want to try to change, but they've memorized an emotion that's pretty much become part of their identity. So take it a step further. If the person's had an experience that produced a very strong emotion, and that emotion is driving the way they think and the way they behave, we could say then, the moment the person has a thought, the thought produces a chemical in their brain that signals their body for them to feel exactly the way they were just thinking, unhappy or negative. The moment they feel negative, they think more negative thoughts. And this cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time conditions the body to memorize that emotion better than the conscious mind. And whenever the body knows better than the mind, that's called a habit. A habit is when the body is the mind. Now, 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old sits in a subconscious memory system instead of memorized behaviors and emotional reactions that are happening behind the scenes of our awareness. So now the person wants to try to change and use 5% of their conscious mind to go against 95% of what they memorize. So they think positively, but they feel negatively. So mind and body are in opposition. They pray for a new life, and they set their intention for a great future, but they feel guilty. It's mind and body in opposition. We have to recondition the body to the new mind. And that's what meditation is about. Meditation, the whole purpose of meditation, is to actually get into the operating system of the subconscious and begin to make measurable changes. And the word meditation literally means, in Tibetan, to become familiar with. So if you're sitting down in a meditation and you're becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, of your unconscious behaviors, your unconscious habits, your unconscious emotions, and you're noticing them and becoming aware of them, that's meditation. You're becoming familiar with that aspect of the old self.
As an observer rather than reacting.
Exactly. That concept in neuroscience is called metacognition. And the fact that we can pay attention to who we're being means then that we can modify our behaviors to do a better job in life.
But yet they come up. So what do we do when they're coming up so that we change and rewire it in that moment? You're saying only meditation can do that?
No, I'm not saying only meditation can do it. I mean, the process of change requires unlearning and relearning. It requires breaking the habit of an old self and reinventing a new self.
Yeah.
It requires what we call in neuroscience pruning synaptic connections, breaking apart those circuits, and then sprouting new connections. It requires unmemorizing an emotion that's been stored in the body and then reconditioning the body to a new mind or to a new emotion. It requires literally losing your mind and creating a new one. It requires changing your energy. So when a person's in the midst of an emotional experience, normally if they react during that emotional experience, they're always going to say things like, I should have never said that. I should have never done that. I should have never thought that. I should have never sent that email. Because those emotions are driving them to act like an amped up animal with a big memory bank. So the difficulty is learning how to shorten the refractory period of those emotions. That's called emotional intelligence. To be able to learn how to regulate and mediate that. And one of the things that meditation does is it allows people to create more coherence in their brain and body, which means that they don't have the same knee-jerk reactions in the same circumstances. And that's what we can control. We can control our inner environment in the beginning more than we can control our outer environment.
So as those thoughts emerge, let's say in meditation, we're in the space of observing them, where anger comes up or frustration, and then we would just notice them and go back to the meditation, and therefore once we're in life, we have that similar reaction?
If you think about it, if you're in a meditation and your body has been conditioned to be the mind, right? And if you could think of your body as the servant to the mind, or the animal, like an unbridled horse. And when we put our body away in a meditation, it's not used to no longer being plugged into the environment. It wants to get up and do things to stimulate some emotion so it can reaffirm its identity. So when you sit in a meditation and you separate yourself from the environment, you're putting your body away and your body is no longer getting its emotional needs met. It's going to buck like an unbridled horse. It's going to kick. It's going to rebel. And every time you bring it back to the present moment, every time you're able to calm it down and bring it back into a relaxed state, every time you notice that it wants to do that and you inhibit its actions, that's reconditioning the body to the new mind. So if you're able to break that cycle while you're sitting in the meditation, you overcome some aspect of yourself. And you've basically broken free from that addiction. Anytime you break free from any addiction, the side effect is true joy. That's the liberation of energy, that the body begins to feel like the chains are being broken away. When that happens, then, if you're overcoming some aspect of yourself and the emotion is no longer in you because you've overcome it, then you can walk into your life and no longer respond to the same conditions in the same way. And so the purpose of meditation, then, is not only to become familiar with the old self and its thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, but to become familiar with the new self. So if you began to ask yourself in your meditation, what is the greatest ideal of myself that I can be today? How would a great person think? How would they act? How would they feel? And if you said, I'm not going to get up until I am this person, you would have to overcome some aspect of yourself in order to do that. Now, as you begin to contemplate who you would like to be, as you begin to think about who you would like to be in your life, who you'd like to be when you open your eyes, how you would like to live your life, the moment you begin to think differently than you normally think, you're forcing your brain to fire in new sequences, in new patterns, and new combinations. And whenever you make the brain work differently, you're changing your mind. Mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. So as you begin to make your brain fire in new ways, nerve cells that fire together wire together. So in time, you begin to install the hardware of the new self ahead of the actual experience before you walk out into your life. You're warming up your brain into a new level of mind, so you begin the process of using those circuits in the rest of your day. Now, the privilege of being a human being is that we can make thoughts more real than anything else. That's the privilege, and we do it all the time. Now, the moment you're in a meditation and you are dreaming or you're rehearsing a new way of being, if you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention, there'll come a moment when your forebrain becomes so activated, becomes so awake, that the thought that you're thinking about will literally become the experience. And as you put all your attention on that thought, and the thought becomes the experience, the end product of the experience is called an emotion. You hadn't have to do anything, but your brain does not know the difference between the actual event that produces the experience and the thought that you have in your brain. To the body, which is the unconscious mind, it doesn't know the difference. So the body gets the emotional signal ahead of the actual environment, and the body begins to change. And if you could reproduce that same emotional state every single day, you would begin to condition your body to a new mind so that your body is no longer living in the emotions of the past, but now aligned to some future destiny. And when you can get your mind and body working together, now you're in a state of being. So then if you can become familiar with this new state of being every day, then you're no longer living a